I do most of my designing on the computer. I have a graphics tablet and I draw in Illustrator, which is part of the Adobe suite. It's a vector package, which means I can scale up and scale down without changing the dimensions of my lines, and it also uses less memory. What's especially useful about designing on the computer rather than by hand is that you can keep switching about your design without having to entirely redraw it. And that was great for this project because I tried so many different combinations of colours until I was finally happy with what I had.
This is the colour palette I've decided on for my tiles, and I worked up the design on Illustrator, and it looked like this initially, and then each of these shapes I can fill with a colour, and that's what I did until I arrived at this combination. And I had a couple of images open next to me of Islamic tiles, just to sort of inform my eye. And I also worked with a photo of my kitchen beside me so that I could make sure that I was using good colours. I want it to complement the kitchen but not matching too much. So, for example, this dark blue doesn't actually appear in the kitchen. Well, I have one dark blue bird, but basically I don't have this colour. I also don't have this dark red. I have orange. But these colours are very sympathetic with the background colours. So that is how I worked on my design. And then I have ordered cutters for my polymer clay, and I have sized them all and separated them out, and I've sent them to the man who is making my cutters, and he is going to produce them for me. So I'm looking forward to them arriving, and then I can do some trial pieces. Some of them are quite small. This is actual size, so some of them are just 10 by 15 mil. The bigger ones are 33 by 45, so they're kind of more like mosaic pieces. And I worked it out. I've got 3,700 pieces to make, which is slightly depressing. I probably shouldn't have worked it out, but I had to. So there we go. And when the pieces come and I do my trials, I'll make another video.
I spent a lot of time on working out what palette I wanted, and here you see me mocking up a few colour combinations. It's quite time consuming, but it's the only way to do it, really. I tried a green palette and I tried a blue one. And they both look lovely, but on balance I decided I preferred the blue one. As well as mixing my own colours of polymer clay, I also tried colouring the surface of white polymer clay with chalk pastels before they'd been fired, and actually it did give some nice results. I wasn't 100% convinced of the longevity of this technique, so I decided it was safer to go back to mixing the colours by hand.
I've been making some samples to check my adhesives and to check my grout and to check my grout colour and my polish. So this piece and this piece was me checking that this adhesive hadn't gone off, because I've had this adhesive for about 5 years and the shelf life they tell you is about 2 years. It's very good quality adhesive, and it's what I use when I'm fixing mosaic. I do mosaic in schools sometimes, that sort of thing. So this is a piece of plasterboard and it's fine, and this is a piece of hardboard and that's fine, because the arch that I'm going to fix to is, some of the wall is plaster and then the curved arch at the top is actually hardboard, so I needed to check. I didn't really know actually, but it does fix to wood beautifully. And I even dried it upside down, because obviously the arch will be above my head, and it was fine. These pieces I grouted white, because I imagined I'd want white grout, but I'm not sure I do now. So I'm going to do a little experiment here with some different shades of grout. White, and also I'm going to do grey. So in here I have pigment, and I use pigment in my stained glass. It darkens up the cement I use and also the lead. This sample tile has got floor polish, which is what I'm going to use to give it a sheen, Pledge Revive It, which is only available in America. So although it's only about a £5 really, you're paying a lot for the delivery, but it seems the easiest way to get just a little bit of a sheen. Don't want a high gloss, just a bit of a sheen. So what I'm not sure about is whether I should use that, I've never used it before, whether I should use this Revive It before or after I've put the what's it called, the grout in. You see, it would be quite nice if I could put the pledge on while it's all still horizontal. But if I do that, then I'm going to be grouting it after I put the pledge on, Now grout is ever so slightly abrasive, so while I'm rubbing it into the grout joints, it might end up removing the pledge finish. So that's what these experiments today are about. So I'm going to mix up some white first of all, and then I'm going to gradually mix up different batches with increasing amounts of black pigment. There we are. So you want it sludgy really, for want of a better word. If it's still got dry bits at the bottom, just very carefully add a little bit more until you get it like thick cream, thick whipped cream. It's very messy if you get it too runny, so you can add a bit more powder if that happens. So that's what it looks like. Now I'm going to put white on this area, and then it will cover both the bit that is polished and the bit that isn't. I am going to, where should I put this? I'm going to add a tiny bit of this black pigment, just to take the colour down a bit. So this is like a dove grey, so it's a very gentle pale grey. So I think that's too light to be significantly different. So if the last one was dove grey, this one is elephant grey. I'm going to try it much darker now. So I get my pigments from a shop called Corneliusson, who are up at Holborn. There's a company that specialises in brick dye and grout dye, and they're called Dye Brick. And they're brilliant. You can get every shade under the sun. And some of their dyes, as opposed to their pigments, you can actually use to change the colour of grout even after you've applied it, which, if you've made a mistake on the colour of your grout, is very useful. It does change the character of a piece if you, depending on what colour you grout it, really does change it. And it is always worth doing a test, because I have made mistakes in the past. You just assume, you think, oh, I know what this will look like, this will be the right colour, and then it isn't. So, this is a grout spreader, and you can spread the adhesive with this sort of tongue grooved side, and this is a flexible sort of paddle side for grouting. So, very handy little thing, I've had it years. Now, I'm just lifting the excess off. And what you really need for cleaning off the surface of grouted tiles, and this is a big job when you're doing mosaic, because there's a lot of grout joints, what you really need is a sponge. So the first few times you run the sponge across, it's sort of dragging a lot of the grout with it. You have to do a lot of rinsing, and you'll never get everything up. And what will happen is you will be left with a very fine dusting of grout. And once it's all dry, that will buff off. But the more you wipe it with your sponge, your damp sponge, in an attempt to get rid of that last remnant of grout, the more you'll spread it around. So this is probably the best approach. Leave it, once it's dried, you can give it a proper buffing. There it is. Now I can't tell at the moment, because I'll have to wait till after I've buffed it. I can't tell whether that has taken the polish off, but I will come back to this later and I will know. Oh, that irritates me. Go on. Go on. There. So, interesting. Which do we prefer? I will get some second opinions. And actually, for deciding this sort of thing, it's quite good sometimes to take photos. You somehow see things in a different way on a screen where it's reduced to when you see the whole. So there's the white side and there's the grey side. So I will wait till it's all dried and give it a nice buff. So I'm just giving it a little wipe with a wet wipe to get the dust off the surface. Sometimes you have to do this a couple of times. This is wet wipes, by the way. Brilliant for most jobs. This has been left for a few hours now, about 4 hours. And it's quite warm, so I'm sure it's all dry. So I'm just going to give it another rub over. Now what I'm looking to see is whether you can still see any of the polish. A little bit, but it's going to need polishing after I've grouted it, I think. And then I will take second opinions about grey or white. Grey or white, grey or white. The grout's set now, it's dry, so I'm going to put some of this Pledge Revive It floor gloss on. Now I paint it on because if you use a cloth you do tend to get bits of fluff, bits of lint from the cloth on the surface. This is a little brush, but obviously if I was going to do a large area I would use a larger brush. but this is the one I've been using on my samples. So I don't think there's any point in putting this stuff on before I grout it. You could see it a little bit, but not enough. Not enough. So I will have to put this on while it's vertical. Actually, I should have probably tried that, shouldn't I? Yeah, that's all right. That's fine. Yeah, it doesn't drip about. I mean, it is quite runny, but you just have to not overload your brush. I think that looks nice. It's glossier than it will be when it's dry. It's very high gloss at the moment. It looks very like ceramic, doesn't it? I'm really pleased with that. So I'll let this dry and then we're done. And I just wash this brush out with water and that seems to work fine.